Welcome, everyone. I'd just like to say thank you for coming tonight, and also to our candidates, and certainly to WEPA, who are co-hosting with us on this event. Just a little bit about nature conservation. Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales was formed more than 65 years ago. Prior to that, nature was pillaged on an industrial scale in this state. Today, NCC has nearly over 200 member groups. They form an environmental movement of thousands of people who have been working to protect nature for over 6 decades. It's through their hard work, vision, tenacity, and courage that they've become a voice for nature. And it's through their work that we've been able to achieve some extraordinary results. Tonight, NCC is delighted to partner WEPA in hosting this Environmental Candidates Forum, and I thank you all for attending. If you'd like to find out more about NCC and what it does and how you can help, you can go to our website, and we'll post that web address in the chat. But look, before we start, I'd just like to go into a little bit of housekeeping for everyone who may not have had experience with Zoom, just to let you know that because there's a number of people online tonight, 160, as John said, you have been placed on mute. So please make sure that you remain on mute. It's only the candidates and the organisers who will be able to speak. For those who are new to Zoom, if you're on a computer, you'll find the chat button and other function buttons towards the bottom of your screen. The iPad users will find it at the top of the screen. At the bottom of the screen, you'll also see a microphone and camera icon, and that's also if you're on a computer. Please keep your camera on so that the candidates can see how many people are on tonight, but keep your mute on your microphone. And this you can do by there's a slash, and you'll see that you are remaining on mute. Candidates will be given a 1-minute warning that their time is running out in answer to their set questions. Then there'll be a 30-second warning bell. Candidates will be allowed to finish their sentence before they are muted, so we won't just cut them off. After all candidates have presented, there'll be a Q&A. This is your opportunity to ask a question to the specific candidate, or if you want, to all of the candidates. You can use the chat function to post your questions. Our team will read out the chosen questions, but look, please understand that because not every question will be able to be read out. So your questions, best is to be succinct and please on an environmental issue. If you do have a question that wasn't answered, we'll post the emails of the candidates who have agreed to answer follow-up questions on the WEPA website tomorrow. The chat is not to be used in a disrespectful way or to attack a candidate. Focus on the issue, not the person. If anyone does behave badly, you'll receive a warning. After that, if the bad behaviour continues, we'll have no alternative but to remove you from the forum. Please use the chat function if you have a question about the event. Let us know if there are any technical problems and to flag if you are having an issue. Please, if you do that, share it with everyone rather than use the private function, because this will help us identify where the concerns are. I just want to thank you now and thank you again and hand you back to John to introduce the candidates and the really interesting part of the forum, which will be their presentations and your opportunity to ask the questions. Thanks again, and over to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Dee. And with that, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first candidate tonight, Penny Hackett from the Reason Party. Over to you, Penny.
Thanks, John, and thanks for hosting this event. I think it's a bit short time for a broad-based meet the candidates thing, but this at least covers some of the issues which are concerning our community. So my name's Penny Hackett, and I've lived in Northbridge and Willoughby for 25 years, and I think I'm reasonably well known. I was the P&C president at Willoughby Public School and led their school overcrowding, and combined with a group of 26 other PCs to put it to the Department of Education about the capacity issues here, and that led directly to the development of 3 new schools and the extensive rebuilding works at other schools, including Willoughby Public. I was also the secretary of the Federation of Willoughby Progress Associations for a couple of years, from 2016 to 18. Now, I need to be very honest here that I made a very last minute decision to run, and my motivation for doing so was Tim's pre-selection, which I just want to say, Tim, this is absolutely nothing personal against you, but it's what you represent. We all, I think, expected that we would have a candidate from the Liberals who would be expected to win. With a moderate woman and a woman who lives in the electorate. And I feel strongly that the Liberals are taking this electorate for granted. It's seen as a safe seat, and I think it's a safe seat for a moderate candidate. And I felt that I had to ride. There was a wave of anger that was rising up, certainly around the people that I know, and I felt someone had to do it. And I've got skills and experience to do that. I feel we need to send a message to the Liberals that you can't take any seat for granted. I've been involved in the political process quite closely over the last 4 years, running the campaign for voluntary assisted dying laws, including 2 horrendous months in New South Wales Parliament last year. And the major parties, unfortunately, both of them, not just the Liberals, they have lost touch with the communities. They're interested in factions, ideology, staying in power, and they seem to have forgotten who they're supposed to represent. A few specific things about the Liberals, because there is no Labor candidate here. I've just been horrified at the political football that climate change has become. And particularly, and I think this resonates with half the Willoughby population, the pronouncements from the Liberal Party about trying to get more women into their parliament. They've got the lowest representation in New South Wales Parliament. It's under 30% across both houses. So they've had an opportunity to remedy that, and they've not taken it. Just an observation on independents and small parties. I've certainly seen through the process with assisted dying laws the impact that smaller parties and independents can have, because they're not constrained by a major party position. I think party MPs are hamstrung by a party position, and they will be tied to push that party position regardless of what their community thinks. So you sort of get the worst of both worlds.
And yeah, I just should let you know that you have gone into your time for answering the questions, which is okay. Yeah. But I will cut you off after the combined 8 minutes. Okay.
So I think the point I'm trying to make runs through all of these questions is that any individual MP has limited ability to affect change on policies of this type. But I would suggest that or a smaller party, particularly if there's a minority government or a small margin, they actually have some leverage which a party MP does not have, and we've seen exactly that in the assisted dying debate. So talking about climate change, I have been following this since the 1980s, and I've been very concerned about it and been absolutely horrified at how things have panned out over the last 12 or so years. I'm very familiar with the economics of climate change, as well as the science of it. But having worked in banking for a very long period of time, we were actually looking at carbon trading schemes on Kyoto credits back in the 1990s, and I felt very strongly that clear signal sent so that the market can adapt, and obviously a range of other things need to be done as well. So I feel that we've been missing that market signal, and the market has been screaming for it. I've worked in project finance deals where that market has been, since the early 2000s, pulling away from coal and fossil fuel projects because they felt they would be stranded assets. A clear commitment and a clear roadmap with deliverables, not just pronouncements and PowerPoint slides about technology that's still a twinkle in someone's eye. On the issue of koala habitat, well, we saw last year in Parliament House the Liberals and Nationals nearly ripped the coalition apart over koala habitat. So it's going to be decent policy there, split ideologically amongst themselves. But I can commit, and for all of these points and everything that I would do as a member of Parliament is to represent evidence and represent the views of the community rather than an idea. See absolutely no reason why they can't resolve this issue of koala habitat. It just takes effort, work and thought, and a lot of that seems to be missing from our political processes. Beaches Link Tunnel, well, I know that the announcement of that project was, I never thought it was going to proceed past the by-elections in 2000. Were preserving votes in by-elections in North Shore and Manly, and they were under challenge from independents at the time when everyone was really stroppy about the council amalgamations. And it has all of a sudden become a project that looks like it's going ahead. It has not been through all the processes that it should have gone through. There's been if there is a business case that's available for people to look at, to consider whether or not the thing actually stacks up on financial grounds and whether there were better alternatives with public transport. Again, from my banking experience, I've worked on 4 toll roads, 2 in Brisbane, 1 the Cross City Tunnel and 1 Lane Cove Tunnel, and they all went insolvent because of traffic. What?
That's the 1 minute warning. I don't know if you heard the bell.
So I think it needs to be properly looked at. I don't know if the parliamentary inquiries are proper looking at it, and the same applies to the other tunnel. If it's not viable financially, then it's going to be a gigantic white elephant around the neck of the taxpayers of New South Wales, and I don't think that's been considered. If it were to go ahead, it would be absolutely critical that there's a express bus lane, dedicated bus lane through it, and all of the environmental issues, which are considerable, would need to be looked at by independent people. It's very unclear what the actual evidence is, and there would need to be some commitment to making absolutely sure that those things have been addressed. And having
Penny, I bet you'll have to wind up.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right. Thanks, Penny. Our next candidate is Lynne Saville from the Greens.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for organising the meeting tonight and for inviting me. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Cammeray land and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and that the land was never ceded. I grew up in Lane Cove in a bushland street, backing onto bushland just upslope of the Lane Cove River, and our sons, and I spent most of my life being born, raised, and having children on the lower North Shore, and I know that we have a fabulous community. My husband has a small local business in the arts, long established, and with strong connections to the lower North Shore. I was honoured to serve 4 terms on Willoughby Council. I stand because I'm passionate about the environment, and I think we have a huge, huge future, with a future based on the principles of social justice and the environment and our communities. As a member of the Greens, I'm part of the International Greens movement, the global ecological movement that's growing in power and influence, particularly in Europe today. So I'm standing, I've got a strong record of a strong track record and experience over 4 council terms, always working towards better environmental protection locally and also regionally. I understand the importance of health, and education. My background is I'm a registered nurse. I've also worked in health promotion, food security and education over many years. And I do understand that a healthy economy is based on a healthy community and a healthy environment, a healthy population. They're all interlinked, the environment and health. I've strongly, over the years, strongly advocated for public school facilities. I was in the Save Chatswood High School committee, which was very powerful. We were able to save the school. And more recently, or the last 10 years, really about the overcrowding issues at Chatswood Primary School. They hadn't quantified the increase in population with the limited space, and that's still been an ongoing issue. The protection locally of conservation areas and identification of heritage items has been a passion of mine, and on each term of council I've been part of the Sydney Coastal Council group, and most of those years on the executive of the Sydney Coastal Council group. And I think over the last 6 years I the chair, mostly as chair, and I stepped down as chair in the last year and a half because I wasn't going to be standing for council again this term. But certainly in my time as chair of the Sydney Coastal Councils Group, which focuses on coastal and estuary councils within the Sydney Basin, I became very aware of marine ecology issues, marine pollution, and the need to protect our harbour more and our coastal and estuaries. So that links more with the tunnel. I'll come back to that later. With regards to the questions, first of all, the question number one about bushfires and would I support the Climate Act? Yes, New South Wales is committed to reach the net zero emissions by 2050 and halve them by 2030. And while the government's applauded for setting these targets, they are aspirational and they're not legally binding, which is why there is a move to have the Climate Act. The Greens have a long history of putting bills to Parliament. Lee Rhiannon's bill, I think, to stop coal seam gas was in 2013. There were more Greens bills about climate change in 2016. And I understand they've already given notice of another bill about the climate emergency. So absolutely, this is a critical decade, and we really have to look at phasing out coal and gas completely by 2030. So I do support in principle Labor's bill when it comes before the House, and I want to ensure that the government's decisions don't derail zero emission goals and our children have a safer future. The next question is about the koala. So the New South Wales list of threatened species has now grown to 1,000. That's in 2000, that's in just 240 years of European habitation of this country. We've now got 1,000 threatened species, which is such a tragedy. Koalas are forecast to be extinct in New South Wales before 2050 unless we act quickly. Cutting down trees for urban development, logging and agriculture is destroying koala habitat and threatens their existence, yet the government is failing to act to protect koala habitat. The koala inquiry made 42 recommendations, which must be adopted urgently by the government if they're serious about protecting koalas. Since 1990, New South Wales koala populations declined between 20 and 50% to be in the range of 15,000 to 25,000 remaining. Yet local extinctions have already occurred and the species is projected to become extinct in the wild by 2030. And as we know, the bushfires decimated thousands of more koalas. The Liberals say that they love and want to protect cute, cuddly koalas, but they've got to start supporting these 42 recommendations. 2/3 of the koala population in New South Wales is on private land. Habitat's been eroded by agriculture, clear felling, and of course, as I just said, the bushfires. Apparently hundreds of thousands of hectares of potential koala habitat land on the east coast and on the north and mid-north coast is suitable for potential koala habitat. But because of the bushfires, now timber is in short supply and loggers are trying to get access to that land, which should really be secured for future koala habitat. So it's really actually a very, very grim future unless the government acts seriously and soon. So we need to prohibit clearing of habitat on private land. Sorry.
There's 1 minute left. That was your 1 minute.
Okay. And also support protection of habitat on private land, incentivise landowners, make it beneficial through conservation trusts, covenants on land, biodiversity incentives. And I think local councils can also have a role to secure that. With regards to the tunnel, yes, I'm opposed to the tunnel. And it's all the risk, the potential environment risks of tunnelling through sandstone, infiltration, the risks at Cammeray Park through silicosis, through channeling through sandstone, as well as loss of parkland, which is an absolute crime in Australia. I do think the solutions would be to abandon the tunnel and to use increase the number of bus routes and bus services between the city, Gordon, Chatswood, North Sydney and St Leonards to the northern beaches.
Sorry, Lynne, you'll have to wind up.
Okay. So, and again about the smokes, the pollution to the children is an absolute crime as well.
Right.
And there are World Health Organiser guidelines. Okay,
Lynne, you'll
I'll
have to
finish now. Thank you. I'll mute.
Thank you. All right. Our next candidate is Larissa Penn, who is an independent.
Thank you, John, and thank you for organising this event tonight. I've noticed a few people in the chat have said that they're having trouble with their connection. We've swapped over to connect to the phone, which seems to be working better, if that's a tip for anyone out there. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, the Cammeray people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging as well. I'm a local mum of 3. I've grown up in the area. I actually went to Cammeray Public School and I was a very proud school captain of the public school. I have lived in Cammeray, Cremorne, Crow's Nest. I now live in Narembeen, also lived in Northbridge for a short time. My grandparents had a home in West Chatswood and I can still remember waking up to the sound of birds in the morning in the beautiful bush gully opposite. I have very fond memories of that. So I'm a true local. Obviously, I've raised my kids here as well, and we just absolutely love living in the area. I've been working pretty hard for Willoughby on all sorts of committees. I have been the PNC Vice President for Cammeray Public School. I also established the Environmental and Sustainability Committee there, and that's up and running and very active. I am the President of the Narembeen Progress Association and I'm the Secretary of the Federation of Progress Associations. I'm also the representative to the Bicentennial Reserve Committee and Flat Rock Gully Committee, which advises council. So I am very well across the issues that are going on in the area. And it's not just, obviously I'm quite well known for my objection to the tunnel and analysis of what the tunnel was going to bring for Willoughby. But I've also been working quite hard with regards to the overdevelopment in the area, schooling concerns, parks, environment, bushland, all sorts of things. So part of my tunnel advocacy, where that started was with Cammeray Public School asked me to do a risk assessment, and that led into a group being formed called Stop the Tunnels. We have brought an 11,000 strong petition to Parliament. I've been working across Parliament, forming relationships there, advocating for our community with regards to these tunnels, and I was a key part of getting the parliamentary inquiry up and running. In terms of my business and science, I've got a business and science background. I've worked in compliance auditing and management consulting, particularly in the scientific field. And I actually worked for one of our largest compliance bodies in Australia. I've audited hundreds of organisations across New South Wales and Australia, and I managed a team of environmental auditors. So I also, in my spare time, volunteer to help with the youth group. So I'm in touch with youth in the area and I guess how they're seeing things and what's going on there as well. I'm also familiar with the healthcare system. I did audit in the healthcare system and consult to it, whether medical suppliers, pharmaceutical and hospitals. I've also been a carer for a mum that had a very complex condition and over 10 specialists. So I'm very grateful for the work of the hospital staff, the nurses and doctors, well aware, I guess, of the issues, challenges and I guess the needs of the healthcare system in the area. So in terms of what I'm running for and what my policies are, I'm looking at 4 main things. One is transparency. I want to see that we are planning well, that we're planning in the public's best interest. And that means that we need to ensure that all projects and all plans, whether they be development or infrastructure or plans for our environment, that they're done in a rigorous way and a way that's objective. We're seeing far too much commercial incompetence, lack of public consultation and feedback and genuine change in particularly that environmental space. Also, respect is another key aspect of my platform, and I think listening to the community, and we have not seen the community being listened to on these projects and in concerns about development and amenity in the area. So respecting the community's feedback and actually taking action is something that I'm keenly aware of. I'm also keenly aware that Willoughby is a highly multicultural, diverse area, and that we need to be really respectful of that diversity and understanding each other, and that's something that I want to bring to the fore as well. Urban livability is another key slice to my platform, and that really, I guess, comes down to good planning, and I want to see sustainable planning. I think in terms of environment and climate, if we're not planning sustainably into the future, then it's going to be very increasingly difficult to hit those targets, those 2050 targets. Also, in regards to environment, keenly aware of the challenges around climate. With regards to, I want to see gas and coal wrapped up. I want to see us innovate. I actually did a research thesis regarding innovation and R&D in Australia, and I really want to see us use those innovative skills to put us forward in terms of creating a sustainable ecology, but also in a sustainable economy. And so I'm quite practical. I want to see that we have good planning regulations, that those promises that we're making at a higher level actually fall down into our planning documents and into our legislation at a lower level too, to ensure that we can meet the goals that we're aiming to meet. So in terms of those questions, firstly, yes, I do support the Climate Act. As I was just saying, I think we need to look even more broadly than that, and I would like to see all sorts of reviews of legislation in terms of how we plan, in terms of EV replacement, in terms of trees and replacement of trees, in terms of bio offsets. I think there are so many areas that we need to actually review to get the system working towards those goals, in addition to a Climate Act that sits over the top. In terms of threatened species, I'm heartbroken that my kids and their kids may never see a koala in the wild. I think that it is essential that we maintain koala habitat. Certainly, I'm against ending the native forest logging. In terms of farmers and in terms of private property, what I would like to see, because the question is quite a practical one, what would I do? My husband's family have property, and I've spent quite a long time around with his grandfather, the kid's great-grandfather, on the farm, and there's no one more sensitive, I guess, to our changing environment than farmers. So I think we need a better consultation process with farmers to come to an agreement about how this sort of habitat is going to be saved. And I'm with Lynne on providing, sorry, is that 1 minute? Thank you. On providing incentives, so a carrot rather than a big stick. I think we have to work together and not come from the city and say, you will do this, but say, how can we do this together? It's really important. Beaches Link Tunnel, obviously a lot of the questions on here I've been very involved with analysing the business case, looking at public transport alternatives. I submitted a document that actually was a in confidence document to the parliamentary inquiry that evidences that the metro is absolutely possible between, say, Chatswood and Dee Why, would take traffic off the road, would be an effective solution. I want the government to go back and have a look at that solution, as well as the public and active transport. We need cycling superhighways so that we can actually use them as a viable transport alternative, safe, clean, viable transport alternative. We need filtered stacks if they're going to go in. We need our trees.
You'll need to wind up.
Okay. Yes, we need our trees protected. I've been working really hard with Cammeray School and the local area on Cammeray Park and the contamination. The first thing that needs to happen is the project needs to be put on hold, and we need the EPA in there classifying it as...
Sorry, Larissa, I'll have to wind you up.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next candidate is Tim James.
Well, good evening. Thanks, everyone. It's terrific to be with you. I'm really conscious of time and understand it's a lot to get through. So let me just try and paint a picture of me and then seek to get into the questions. So I am the Liberal candidate. I'm a 28-year-long member of the Liberal Party and proudly so. And people shouldn't call me anything other than a Liberal. That's what I am. So I'm a local. Willoughby has been my home for 31 of my 46 years, and my family goes back 5 generations. They have lived and served across this Willoughby community, and I'm really proud of that. My background is one of being grounded in community. As a young man in my early 20s, I became involved in the leadership of the Artarmon Progress Association, where we lived at the time. I grew up initially on Penshurst Street, Roseville in the electorate, and then moved to Cameron Avenue, Artarmon, which is where Mum and Dad still call home. And on the APA executive, there were a range of local issues, which I think are not dissimilar to many that we face across this community. There were concerns about heritage and open space in connection at the time with the Artarmon Bowling Club. There were concerns about a big proposal back then, as it was for development, indeed, above the airspace of Artarmon Railway Station, and naturally we fought against that. There were concerns and issues pertaining to Artarmon Library, commuter safety, and various commuter car parking and various other such issues. And that was a terrific grounding. And since then, I've been engaged in a range of community-based organisations, whether they be clubs, local clubs, life education, teaching kids, the Friends of Sydney Harbour, the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust. So I am grounded in community, and that is what motivates me. From a professional point of view, just briefly, I'm a lawyer trained in the law. I hold multiple qualifications. I've worked in healthcare. I've led an industry body. I've been a minister's chief of staff. I am grounded in public policy as well. In the end, all politics is local, and the local issues that I'm talking about and which I'm hearing about pertain to open space. They pertain to government services and infrastructure. So that includes obviously schools, roads, hospitals, public transport. And the people of Willoughby have a wonderful natural environment and community and a great array of government services. But there are challenges and issues, and we can make it better still. And my pitch is that it is a member of a government that will deliver for Willoughby. And naturally, that is what has been the case, as you all know, for the last 2 decades. And Gladys has been an outstanding local member. I'm proud that she's endorsed me. I've known Gladys for well over 20 years. And I seek to fill those big shoes. I'm very conscious of that. I'm sensitive to that and very respectful of that. I'm also someone who has stood up for and will always seek to stand up for due process, for openness for people and community. And that has been so right across my engagement in community, in politics, in professional life. I want to ensure that we always have, and I hope tonight we will have a civil, thoughtful and considered discussion and debate. And that's the basis on which I seek to engage with everyone, to listen to everyone, to learn from everyone, to consult, to communicate, to serve and to represent. I should point out, unlike others, I am not a single issue candidate. I am here to listen and seek to address all of the issues of all of the people right across the Willoughby community. And I take nothing for granted. I take no votes for granted. I do not take this by-election for granted. I am working extremely hard every day to put my best foot forward and obviously my party's best foot forward to seek to listen, talk with and to seek to represent this community. Moving to questions, and I'm really conscious of time. I'll just try and move through them swiftly. On the question pertaining to a Climate Act, look, obviously any piece of legislation should be seen on its merits. So I will always look at legislation on its merits. But I just say this coalition government has done more than any other to seek to address environmental concerns, climate change needs, to seek to manage the transitions that are in play, in particular in relation to our system of energy, but at the same time to meet the economic and employment needs of our state. And I put to you that from a Liberal point of view, these are not binary issues. The environment is not here and the economy is here, but there is a way and a process and means by which we can preserve our natural environment and look after our biodiversity and meet the many environmental challenges that we face, but at the same time to have economic growth, to have jobs, to support communities, regional communities, people and jobs right across New South Wales. And also obviously at the same time to have lower power bills, reliable and affordable supply. And we all know the world is moving, and getting the balance right and not seeing it in a binary context is very much, I think, the Liberal way, and that's certainly how I see it. On the question of habitat, koala habitat, private land, logging, I'll just say this. I want my children, my two girls and boy, to come very soon to enjoy our natural environment as I have and as my family has, again, including in this area for many, many years. So yes, we should act to protect an iconic Australian animal, the koala, and this government is doing just that. I spoke today to a minister in this government, as I do often, and I would do so even more if elected, obviously, to stand up and represent this community. This coalition government has acquired more than 600,000 hectares and added them to the National Park Estate in New South Wales. That is a huge investment in national parks and biodiversity. At the same time, forestry does play an important role in our economy and regional communities in particular, and sustainable logging should not be opposed. And yes, private property rights do matter, and there is a balance to be struck there. And I should note that it is a proud history, a Liberal history, that did establish the National Parks and Wildlife Service, that did establish the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Liberal Party has a very strong track record when it comes to the environment. And we are proud of that, and we'll seek to champion that. When it comes to the tunnel, my position is this. I come at it with fresh eyes and with open ears, and I want to hear from all points of view. And there are, I know, a range of issues, concerns and perspectives across this electorate. My job, if elected, would be to ensure that this project, if it proceeds, is there to meet the needs, the interests, and obviously to take account of safety and lifestyle of our local community, and to ensure that they are met. Now, this project is some years away yet, so my role is to listen, to reflect points of view, to look at all points of view, all options, and to openly consult with people and to put the positions of the local community to government, to have conversations with ministers. Thanks, John. So I mean, I have commenced those discussions. I don't mind saying I spent before Christmas almost 2 hours with Larissa. We took a walk together around Flat Rock Gully, and I listened to Larissa, and I will continue to listen to Larissa and many people, and really anyone who comes at this issue with goodwill, with genuine concern, with a level of knowledge. That is the job of a local member of parliament, and I would absolutely respect that and uphold that. I know there are concerns, and I know that people and lives are at stake here, and we need to look after people. So that would be very much how I would come at it. I know there are issues of risk management, of process, of construction related issues. The way that this could be built, I think, needs to be looked at. I know
you'll need to wind up soon.
Yeah, happily. I know the concerns about green space. I'm happy, obviously, to talk more. Really, I am all ears. I come at this fresh, and I would listen and reflect the views of this community on this important issue. Thanks very much for having me along.
Okay, thanks, Tim. All right, our next and final speaker is William Bourke, who is the candidate for the Sustainable Australia Party.
Thank you, John. And firstly, I want to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first Australians and traditional custodians of the lands where we live, learn and work. Thank you to the Nature Conservation Council and also WEPA. I recall I attended a similar event before the state election in 2019, which I thoroughly enjoyed when I was running for the upper house in New South Wales. Thank you also to our audience for attending and also for all of our other candidates for running. It's great for democracy. Well, I'm an elected councillor at North Sydney and also the Deputy Mayor at North Sydney. My ward sits within the electorate, St Leonard's ward. I've lived on the lower North Shore for around 20 years and early on worked for about 2 years on the front desk at the Willoughby Leisure Centre while I was studying my Masters in Marketing and Sports Management. So I know our community, it's a great community, and my small business office where I am now sits in the electorate in Crow's Nest. It's been here for around 15 years. A little bit about Sustainable Australia Party. We're an independent community movement. From the broad political centre, we support a science and evidence-based approach to policy, not a left or right-wing approach, but science and evidence. We do have a broad policy platform to address Australia's growing economic, environmental and social issues. And top of the list for us is protecting our environment, stopping overdevelopment and stopping corruption. There's much more in our broad policy platform, everything from affordable housing to sustainable and efficient transport systems to a more diverse and self-sufficient economy. Our overarching theme, of course, is sustainability, and we talk about redefining growth because we believe that we humans are operating outside of safe environmental limits. This is basically ecological overshoot. It's leading to outcomes such as species extinctions, deforestation, overfishing, resource scarcity, plastic oceans, and of course, climate change. We need to operate our society within safe environmental limits. That is the key. That is sustainability. And that's what our party is all about. Sustainable Australia Party is the only political movement to strongly challenge this folly of unlimited growth in both consumption and population, the twin drivers of Australia's growing environmental problems in particular, according to our major scientific reports, including the State of the Environment report, our major environmental report that comes out every 5 years. So redefining growth, we need good growth, not bad growth. What we're saying is we need growth in health and well-being. We need growth in human health and well-being, the health of our environment, education, job opportunities, housing affordability, and growth in democracy. That's good growth. So we prioritise that type of good growth over what you would loosely term economic growth as measured by the crude economic statistic known as aggregate GDP. Now, this aggregate GDP is driven by growth in consumption and of our finite resource base and population. They're unsustainable goals to be aiming for, and they need to be changed. In terms of the specific questions, climate change, one of the crises to come out of ecological overshoot. And of course, we must act on climate change. We need to contribute to staying below 1.5 degrees global temperature rise, compared, of course, to pre-industrial levels. So a minimum target of net zero emissions by 2050 is not going to cut it. We need to be aiming for 2035. That's going to be difficult, but that's where we really should have a preferred target according to the science. We need no more coal mines. We need no more fracking for coal seam gas. We need to end fossil fuel subsidies. And we need to stabilise Australia's population if we're going to meet those targets. All of those science-based solutions are what we talk about. So yes, support a climate act, but more importantly, we need a sustainability act. In terms of threatened species, or in our biodiversity or animals and biodiversity policy, we support a stronger Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. Now, of course, that's a federal act, but that really should be the big starting point for our nation. Properly enforce national biodiversity and native species program, widespread urban, rural and marine animal habitat protection, and stronger laws to prevent inappropriate land and tree clearing. Of course, we should not be clearing any habitat where there is threatened, vulnerable or endangered native species. And in terms of farmers, they play such an important role in our society. What we'd say is to further develop land stewardship funds to support relevant farmers to, I guess, help manage biodiversity values on their properties, including, areas of high conservation value. The Beaches Link Tunnel, I am 100% strongly opposed to. We need, well, firstly, as an elected North Sydney councillor, I'm on the record voting against this project, as well as the Western Harbour Tunnel, to be frank, and any new mega roads in Sydney, particularly privatised roads that basically monetise for the private industry, our transport use that are natural monopolies. We should be supporting sustainable transport initiatives, rail line solutions like the metro, better and safer bicycle networks, as well as pedestrian infrastructure. Now, this is not a party or an independent issue. There are some independents and MPs who support this Beaches Link tunnel. So we need to make sure we vote for people with good policy, not based on whether they're with a party or an independent. And I would simply reiterate that around the Western Harbour Tunnel. Basically, I'm again strongly against that. We shouldn't be promoting car-inducing mega roads. We need sustainable transport solutions. That's probably about it for me.
Oh, you did. Thank you, William. You did better than the time allocated. Thank you very much. All right. Well, that brings us to the next part of our evening, which is the open question section. But just before I move to that, in terms of the pre-provided questions, I think everyone's had a go at questions 1, 2 and 3, but a number of candidates didn't say anything about question 4 in relation to the Western Harbour Tunnel. So I might quickly, except for William, so I might quickly just ask the candidates one at a time, just in 2 sentences to address perhaps that question, which was in relation to the Western Harbour Tunnel. What will you do to ensure that the risk to human health posed by historical contamination at Cammeray Park and toxic sediment in Sydney Harbour are properly managed? B, green space such as Cammeray Park is protected, and C, public transport alternatives have been considered. So perhaps if I start, you don't have to answer the question if you think you've answered it, but I'll give you 2 sentences each to answer that, because it was a specific question sent out beforehand. So perhaps starting with you, Penny, in 2 sentences.
It's exactly the same issue as the Beaches Link. They're part and parcel of a policy that's a project that's been announced possibly for political reasons, and there are suggestions that the Beaches Link Tunnel is designed to feed traffic through the new harbour tunnel to shore up the business case for the WestConnex. So it just hasn't been properly looked at, and until it's probably looked at, it shouldn't proceed. It comes back to the...
Okay, I might stop you there, just because we're so short.
It's being done properly.
Okay, thanks, Penny. Now, the next, Lynne, in relation to Western Harbour Tunnel.
Yes, no, I'm opposed to that. I was actually in a number of the rallies opposed to WestConnex, and similarly some of the earlier rallies about the Northern Beaches Tunnel, and was also handing when the WestConnex people came over to Chatswood to warn people in Chatswood. I assisted them with their leafleting to warn local people about the Northern Beaches Tunnel when it was first announced. Similarly to Penny's comments, it's a flawed tunnel, and I think the system is flawed. I think it's based on a system of urbanisation.
Thank you.
Rather than,
Larissa?
sorry.
Okay, we just have to move on quickly. Larissa?
I did touch on the Cammeray Park issues, and that's all about getting the EPA involved, I think, for protection of the community from contaminants. On the wider issue, the Western Harbour Tunnel, I've always opposed. The reality is we have a starter contract signed over in Rozelle to start the connections. I think the government's position would be, and Tim could clarify, that creates a sovereign risk if we back out of the contracts. My argument would be that the risk to the harbour and the risk to the parks that are contaminated, mitigating those risks, is going to far outstrip in terms of cost than any sovereign risk that exists. So I would still be pushing for a stop to the Western Harbour Tunnel, and perhaps with the amount of work that's going on with the Warringah Freeway, separate contract, that we actually look at that Warringah Freeway contract and turn it into a more sustainable option for public and active transport and better connections across the North Shore to avoid the traffic implications.
Okay, thank you. And Tim.
Yeah, thanks. Conscious of time. Look, obviously, the EPA would be involved, intimately involved, and would need to be monitoring, assessing, signing off on so many elements. There are countless sort of regulatory oversights and requirements involved in such a project, obviously. But more broadly, on the question of green space, I think it is important that we look carefully at what would be the rehabilitation of the green space affected. How can we seek to ensure, ideally, that there is no net loss of green space? And I'm aware, for example, of the idea that there should be green space over the freeway in time to connect up Anzac and Cammeray Parks. Now, I think that's an exciting idea, very worthy of consideration, and I'm happy to look at that. But again, I just repeat what I said before. Fresh eyes, open ears. I will listen, consult and represent people right across this community on this issue and all others. John, I should just mention, by the way, that I was told in total this would be 1 hour, and I'm afraid I've got to go at about 7:30 to an important Chinese community event. And I hope
I'm sorry. Okay, we'll move on then. Okay, that leaves very little time. Okay. Maybe we can move on to the first question then from the audience, and perhaps if we can choose a question directed to you, Tim.
Sure, feel free.
Hi, I'm reading the questions. My name's Heidi from Weeper. As you might expect, there were quite a few towards Tim from our audience. A couple want to know whether you're going to come back and live in the electorate, Tim.
Yes.
Yes, okay, good, quick, fast answer, thank you. There was a question that said, what happened to your previous public advocacy for the tunnels? You have tweeted #we need a tunnel.
Oh, look, there's been a range of comments over a long period of time, but I mean, you've heard what I've said now. Obviously, in the context of previous campaigns and recognising, as I do, how much to broader Sydney this means. I mean, for anyone, who gets held up when the Spit Bridge is lifted and, there's basically a car park there and in many other places. I mean, there must be a step forward taken. The question is, what is the right step at the right time with all of the right measures and management and arrangements? So, look, obviously, you've heard what I've said now, and I stand by my comments. And again, fresh eyes and open ears, I can assure you.
Okay, I do know you have to go. but there was another one directed towards you.
Sure.
Last July, you wrote that growing gas supply is a national priority and it's time to get on with growing supply. How do you reconcile this with the fact that gas is a polluting fossil fuel?
Well, in my work at the Menzies Research Centre, and there's a report that is online, which I invite all of you to have a good look at, that reflects some research and writing that I had a hand in together with others. It tells the story of how Australia must have a level of baseline energy supply. And we all know what is happening in relation to coal. And in order to maintain a stable, secure, affordable and much cleaner level of baseload energy supply, gas is a very important transition fuel. It is more efficient, it is much cleaner than coal. Australia has it in abundance, and it does have an important role to play. I know there are some who would seek to demonise it, but in fact, if you look at the experience around the world, gas is a very important partner to renewable energy. In so many ways, they need one another to optimise the energy system in the broader sense. So gas is an important transition fuel for our future in this country. Absolutely, I believe that to be the case.
Do you have to leave now, Tim, or can you join in some that were for everybody?
Look, I'll take one more. I'm very sorry. Again, I've been told this is 1 hour. I don't mean to duck any question. I'm happy to take, feel free to send me a list of questions afterwards. Happy to take anything on notice, but I just have a Chinese community event in connection with the Lunar New Year, as you'd understand at this time.
Sure.
I need to get to.
Well, perhaps, is it okay with you? I do have your email address. If we post that and people can email you, is that okay?
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for attending.
Thank you. Thanks for having me along. Good night, everyone. All the very best to you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Are we going to continue now with questions, John?
I think we should.
I do want to say there was a lot of chat, a lot of interesting chat, but a lot of it wasn't questions. So I will try to go through some of the ones that were direct questions, and I'll pick up some more as we listen until, I think this was really going to go till around 8 o'clock. I'm not sure what happened with Tim's timing. So the rest of them, there were none. The only direct questions were for Tim, as you probably might have expected. So all of these are for everybody. So I will just read them out, and I'm not, John, if you want to, some of them have been combined and some of them have been shortened. So first one, what are you going to do to stop the rezoning of koala corridors and habitat in Sydney's last colony in southwest Sydney?
Do you want me to go first?
I might, yes, we'll start with you first, and then I'll vary the order in terms of answering.
Yeah. One observation I would make is, I think I said before, that any single MP has difficulty actually influencing policy, particularly if they're part of a party, but I have, for my sins, become quite well known for speaking my mind and raising issues, and I've learned that in New South Wales Parliament you have to be the squeaky wheel, and there's a lot of horse trading that goes on and about a whole range of different issues, and we're in a situation at the moment where the government is, were someone other than Tim to win this seat, the government would be in minority, and there would really be scope for the candidate to exercise some leverage. All of those issues that have been raised about the koala habitats and any related issues, there's no reason why they can't just be considered and dealt with based on the evidence, and that just seems to be missing in our democracy. So personally, yes, I would support that. It sounds like it's been very well thought through, and I think it's a, is that right, Lynn, that it's Kate Fairman is pushing that in Parliament. I feel very strongly that that collaborative approach of working with the crossbenchers and with the government and the opposition and relationship building, I think that is the way. Being noisy, outspoken, but also collaborative is the way to get things done in a Parliament when you're not part of a party.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Lynne.
Yes, Penny, I agree with Penny, but I think, yes, Kate Fairman has been pushing it through. She is a member of a party, she's a member of the Greens, and she has been working, of course, because they're in minority, they have to work with all the crossbenchers and everyone else, and some of the Liberals have been sympathetic. I think there needs to be, to really adopt the 42 recommendations of the Koala inquiry, and I think to really identify where the habitat is and to go much stronger with the developers and enforce the Threatened Species Act, get the council on board as well. And it just seems that we're developing more and more land and we're going to be losing more and more canopy. We're going to have more dead suburban areas that are heat islands, and we really need to review how we plan and how we think about the future and put animals first or have a greater respect for nature in all our laws. In terms of the money that Lend-Lease may already have invested in the site, I think there has to be some sort of negotiation. There might be some trade-offs with other developments they're wanting to do elsewhere, but I think it's imperative for the government to try to start negotiating. This is one of the last healthy koala populations, and it's increasing because it's been protected, and it's within the Sydney area, whereas so many other of the koala populations are in decline.
Okay, thank you, Lynne. Okay, Larissa.
Sorry, almost forgot to mute there. I think that habitat is extremely important to protect, and I'd be supportive of the work that Kate's been doing and the inquiry's findings. I think there's a bigger issue going on. There seems to be a complete lack of understanding about wildlife corridors. And that was sort of evidenced tonight by what Tim was saying, is that we've reserved a national park over here, so that fixes all of our problems. And I think that's a piece that I would be trying to, I guess, educate decision makers more about, is how wildlife corridors work and how important they are to the survival of our endangered species. Just this whole bio offsets idea and this whole idea that you can just have a park over here and that's enough is just completely inadequate and isn't really how our species in Australia particularly works. We need those wildlife corridors and they need to be protected.
Thank you. And William.
Thanks, John. Look, I guess in the last 250 odd years, we've cleared so much of our bushland and forest that we really shouldn't be clearing any more land. As a starting point, I read recently in the conversation that we kill tens of millions of wild animals every year by land clearing across Australia, not just koalas, lizards, mammals, you name it. So we're in a crisis point. As a very first step, it should be illegal to clear any land that has, as I mentioned before, threatened, vulnerable or endangered native species. So that really is a starting point. And, you know, it will take some government money at the end of the day. It will take particularly federal government money. They own the Reserve Bank of Australia. They can print some money, as they've been doing the last few years, so they can afford to, you know, support states and local councils with supporting our farmers and other landowners to preserve that habitat.
Thank you. Right, Heidi.
Yep, I'm back. Okay, another one for everybody. Australia is still lagging way behind the rest of the world on electric and hydrogen powered cars. What more would you strive to do in New South Wales to improve their uptake and pressure the federal government for change?
Okay, we'll start with you first, Lynne, this time.
Thank you, John. Firstly, to reduce the import tax on electric cars. And I think there are so many other incentives with regarding to costs for registration. I recently, over a year ago now, imported a second-hand electric car from Japan through Good Car, and I think that it seems to be prohibitive for so many people to buy electric cars in Australia because there are so many brands and styles that aren't even coming to Australia. We need far more EV charge points. We need to have EV charge points in virtually every commercial building, but certainly that import tax is a really major thing. And I think the federal government just has to start making it so the state and federal governments have to have their own fleets as all electric and start increasing the taxes on the fossil fuel cars. You know, councils could be increasing car spaces on the price for car parking on the fossil fuel cars and the larger cars. It's free parking for EVs. You know, there are many, many incentives. Apparently the NRMA and Good Car Company are working together on a reduced cost of insurance for EVs, and I think that's another positive step. But yeah, reducing import tax, free parking for EVs, I think is really an important thing, but legislating against fossil fuel cars, because I know it's going to disadvantage those who are on low income, but we must have other incentives for them. And you can buy electric cars secondhand more cheaply. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynne.
Thanks.
And Larissa?
How long have I got?
A minute.
Well, I think it's a mix of what Lynne said. So it's incentives in terms of registration, import tax, those sorts of levers. It's also regulation. It's not just the federal government. I mean, the state government has, New South Wales state government's jumped in and tried to sort of kick off this transition, but it went through quite quietly, so I'm not sure if anyone's aware, but basically the plan is by 2030, by the time the tunnel's open, that there's an acknowledgement and a goal that will only be at 30% transition new vehicles, and the new vehicle market is much smaller, obviously, than the existing vehicle market. And at that point, EVs will start to be taxed. Now, that legislation's been passed through New South Wales Parliament. I'm going to ask for a review of that. That is a disincentive. If you look at Norway actually used tolls, publicly owned toll roads, to replace their fuel excise tax. And this to me seems to be the key problem, is the government's trying to find ways to monetize the alternatives, and they're not able to do that. We need to be more creative and innovative about how we replace those taxes in a way that doesn't create disincentives for EVs. I agree with the putting points out there, but until we really address this sort of disincentive that's built in Australia, we're not going to get the import. There's a fear at the moment, a very real fear, that what's going to happen is countries banning diesel at the moment, yet we're importing those cars with poor fuel standards. So our
you have to wind up.
Our pollution, I'm very passionate about this topic, our pollution levels, urban pollution levels, are going to keep escalating because we have one of the world's highest use of diesel engines, and we're actually importing more, and we're going to get those dirty vehicles into Australia. It's a real issue, and it's something the government has to do something about now.
Okay, thanks. And William?
Well, thanks, John. This is an interesting one. There's a couple of layers to this issue, and obviously it sits within a broader transport approach, which, you know, we should be prioritising the most ecologically sustainable transport systems. It's not really cars. Whilst prioritising public transport systems, Sustainable Australia Party does support the uptake of electric vehicles and related infrastructure. We need better infrastructure in that regard, but EVs still take a lot of finite and non-renewable resources. So overall, whilst we do prioritise that over, internal combustion engine vehicles, we'd like to see a deprioritisation of cars in general in our society.
Okay, thank you. Penny?
Well, I agree entirely with what everyone else has said. I would also add that we need an overarching philosophy about it, supportive philosophy from government, because what they say and what they do are two different things. And there's a lot of talking down of electric vehicles. I think that's changing a bit because they've realised that the population really wants them. But there's a range of behavioural things which will encourage people to use them, but there also needs to be economic incentives. And 15 years ago, you could only use a transit lane. You could use a transit in California was if you had an electric vehicle. So there's a whole multitude of things that could help with the uptake, but I agree with every single thing everyone else has said.
All right, thank you. All right, back to you, Heidi.
Thank you. I'm afraid we've got a bunch of really good questions. I'm not sure how much time we're going to have, and it's hard to answer them quickly.
We could go to 8, so
okay,
and finish up then. So 15 minutes maybe.
Okay, I've got at least 2 more excellent ones and a lot more after that. If elected, this is for everyone, will you call for a ban on donations to political parties or candidates from fossil fuel companies at a state level?
Okay, that's a quick one, and I'd appreciate an answer.
A yes,
a
no
quick answer in that.
Do you want me to go first? I'm next.
Larissa, your turn this time.
Quick answer, yes.
Okay.
It's can I qualify it? Because it's inconsistent with our goals. We've set a target to net zero. If that's true, then we shouldn't be then using money from fossil fuels to fund political campaigns. So it's inconsistent.
Okay. William.
That's a yes from me as well. In Sustainable Australia Party's anti-corruption and governance policy, we also want to ban all property developer donations across Australia, including federally.
Thank you. Penny.
There needs to be wholesale reform of our political donation laws. It's not just fossil fuels. There's vested interests that you might have seen in the press this week about the gazillions of dollars that both Labor and Liberal are receiving from donors that are completely unidentified. It should be real time. Federally, you don't know who's donated to an election campaign until a year afterwards. So it needs to be real time. There need to be caps.
Sorry, Penny, but specifically on the question of banning donations from fossil fuel companies, can you give us a yes, no answer?
Absolutely, and any, yes.
Okay.
And others.
Okay. Lynne.
Yes, absolutely. The Greens do not accept donations from corporations, only from their members and individuals. I think we need to really tighten transparency laws. The Greens did research maybe about 20 years ago. It was called, the research project was called Democracy for Sale, and they investigated all the donations, which is sometimes very, very hard to find, and the links between the developers and the developments that were approved, and they were certainly aligned.
Okay,
And,
I'll stop you.
yeah,
So that's a yes.
that's
all right,
fine.
Thank you.
But yes,
thanks,
the answer is yes.
All right, next question, Heidi.
Unmute. Sorry. Given that raising the wall of the Warragamba Dam will threaten the Blue Mountains World Heritage Area, will you oppose the raising of the wall if elected?
Okay, this time, William, you get to go first.
Thanks, John. Yes, strongly oppose that. Been campaigning for quite some years, actually, with the Coolong Foundation and Give a Dam. And it's another demonstration of this growing consumption and population. And it's really about protecting, it's really about allowing property development on the floodplains below the Blue Mountains. So strongly opposed.
Thank you. Penny.
Exactly what William said. It's purely opening up new land for new housing.
All right. Lynne?
It's not necessarily environment support.
Oh, sorry, I thought you'd finished.
Absolutely opposed. And I did work in the Hawkesbury for 9 years on a food security project, and we were trying to secure both farmland and bushland areas, but that floodland is all the land that's left this side of the river for farmland now. But yes, absolutely respect the ecology and the natural systems of the Blue Mountains, and I oppose the raising of the wall of the Warragamba Dam. I think there are other ways of conserving water within Sydney, recycling, conserving and reusing water rather than having the dam.
Thank you. Larissa?
Yes, I'm opposed. We can't be classifying things as World Heritage Sites, identifying important Aboriginal sites, just like with the tunnel projects. There's 20 threatened sites from that project, and then ignoring that and destroying them because of our development needs. We need to, again, it's about innovation and it's about forward thinking. And I think one of the issues we have in Sydney is that we are increasingly trying to densify rather than investing in, say, high-speed rail to move people out.
Okay, I'm going to stop you because you've gone off topic and we've got lots of questions.
Well, it's all related because it's all about
okay,
development.
back to you, Heidi.
Thanks. This is a slightly more general one. How are you going to engage the community on issues, for example, on the tunnel or any other issues that are concerning Willoughby?
Okay, Penny, back to you. The first answer on that one.
I've spent the last year running a community campaign to get local voices to contact MPs about assisted dying laws, with a petition of 100,000 and 26,000 emails sent to MPs. And it is absolutely essential that MPs actually listen to their communities and take feedback. And I don't know if anyone's seen what Jackie Lambie's been doing, which is putting issues up on things that she's voting on where she holds the balance of power and asking people for comments and their positions. And I think that we've got these marvellous social media tools that enable people to really have their say, and I would fully support regular surveys and consultation, but also meeting and talking. Nothing beats talking to the people that you represent.
Okay, thank you. Lynne.
Thank you, John. Absolutely what Penny said, and ensuring regular meetings, Zoom, regular contact, regular communication, and also that the person who is elected attends those meetings, those community meetings, and has regular meetings with community leaders, separate from those that, you know, normally if you want to meet with your MP, you have to wait 6 months or whatever and write 5 pages to apply to do so. I think to maintain those community links and having an open door policy is very, very important.
Okay,
Thanks,
you.
John.
Larissa.
I think because I've been running a campaign and been involved in lots of groups, currently I continue those links into the community. Just walking down the street, actually living here helps as well, just talking to people, never shy to have a chat. I think there are some people in our community who are not being connected with, and I think I'd like to really focus in on getting a voice for our immigrant community, for example, for the youth in our community. I'd love to have a youth council that meets regularly and gives really valuable feedback, and use some of those social media tools to connect with them as well, which I'm doing in my campaign now. But I think we need to make an effort to connect with a broad section of our community and do that in different ways that suits them, not us.
Okay, thank you. And William.
Thanks, John. Yes, our community is quite well educated, and they are great in the way that they approach me as a councillor, for example, or as a person in the Sustainable Australia Party. They are contacting us regularly. But there are a lot of ways to get out there. This week I've been out at Cammeray Park with the community. I've been at HMAS Platypus down on the north, further south with the community. I hold regular market stalls and speak to the community. And probably my favourite is when I letterbox and I just say hello to people in their front yards and talk to them about what's happening in the community. So there's a lot of ways you can do it, and it's probably the best part of my job.
Okay, thank you. Now, Heidi, we probably only have, if we're going to stick to an 8 o'clock time frame, we probably only have
I've
time
got
for
one
or
more
two more questions.
I've got one more that I think is excellent as the ending question, which was, excluding Tim James and our absent Liberal Democrat, what 3 things maximum would you leave us thinking of that differentiate you from our 3 other more progressive candidates here? Do you want me to read it again, or clear?
I've forgotten who I started with last. Did everybody hear that? Did all the candidates get that question, or do you want to repeat it?
I'll just repeat the main part of it. What 3 things maximum would you leave us thinking of that differentiate you from the other also more progressive candidates here?
Okay, I think it might be Larissa to go first this time. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, Larissa.
Go for it.
I'll go first. I would like to leave it up to voters to compare. Obviously, it's not my way to do this, but considering you asked, I think I'm very current. I think I've been very involved in the local community, and right now I'm involved. So my knowledge is extremely current. Obviously, I'm independent. I'm the only independent running. I'm not aligned with any political parties, and I think the concerns of Willoughby don't have to get filtered through a party system where there may be other priorities at play that can go straight to Parliament. And I think I'm very passionate, not to say other people aren't, but I'm willing to talk to anyone. Took Tim James on a walk through Flat Rock and in his suit for 2 hours. I'm bold and passionate. So I think perhaps that's something that differentiates me slightly.
All right, thank you, Larissa. William.
Thanks, John. Well, as a leader of an independent community movement, we have a deep policy platform driven by and for the community. So we have a policy platform that is broad, based on sustainability, and you know what you're going to get when you vote for Sustainable Australia Party, a deep community-driven set of policies. Secondly, obviously, I know the area well, and environmentalism is my passion. I grew up on the urban fringe, bushland is my backyard, and I'll fight tooth and nail to make sure that we protect our environment, number one, because if you don't have a healthy environment, you don't have a healthy population or a healthy economy. And thirdly, I think I've got the experience. I've got a background in business as well, in finance as well as marketing, and a broad set of skills as well as in politics now. So I think I've got the best experience, the broadest experience, as well as managing a political party and being driven by consensus. It can work with left or right, it can work with people to achieve good outcomes and keep moving forward.
Thank you. Penny.
I represent the Reason Party, which was the voluntary euthanasia party and merged with a Victorian-based party, which is represented by just a wonderful female MP called Fiona Patton. And we have a full suite of policies on our website. So, you know, federal, Victorian and New South Wales policies. So you can be very clear about what it is that you're going to get if I was raison d'etre of the party is that it's about people and it's about making evidence-based decisions and policy that's guided by evidence and common sense, not ideology. And the time I've spent in Parliament in the last year, I know every single MP. I almost know what they eat for breakfast. I understand how Parliament works, and I've been as long as it's not a party member of a party machine. I think we need someone who is interested, committed to the community and local and represents our values.
Thank you. Lynne.
Thank you, John. Well, I think we've got some fabulous candidates, and I've seen that in the chat as well. And I just wish one of the ones who are still here, I hope one of us gets in. I'm asking the community of Willoughby to vote for me because I'm a member of the Greens, which is part of a global ecological movement which is growing internationally to try to limit the worst effects of climate change. It's 40 years too late in Australia. I just think it's so terribly critical. The human race is now facing the extreme risks from climate change as well as weapons of mass destruction. They're the two biggest things facing human beings today. But we can do something about it, and that's what gives me great hope. The Greens also have the most incredible policies. If you can look at the policies online, they're all available. We share our policies. That's why other people are starting to use them. Personally, I've got a very, very good track record of working in the community, on council, in health, in food security and education as well. I've worked with many refugees, student nurses, paramedics over the years as well. Greens policies are bottom up. They are based on evidence. They're not top down. And so we're very, very much aware of the community and work with the community. My main platforms, climate action, integrity and public life. The reason we're having this by-election is because of the pork barrelling and the behaviours that have occurred. I'm not going to comment on them, but we shouldn't even be having this by-election. So of course, integrity in government and public life generally is really important, and social justice and opportunity for all members of our community. And also another aspect of the Greens is that we believe very much in justice for Aboriginal people and to properly recognise them.
Thank you, Lynne.
And thank you. Thanks, John.
All right. Well, that brings our evening essentially to a close. For those who missed it earlier, I repeat my request to show your support for WEPA. If you want to support us by going onto our website and joining for our bargain rate at $10 per year or less, just Google WEPA and you can get to our membership. I'd like to thank my co-host, Dean Newton from the Nature Conservation Council. I'd like to thank the candidates for attending. It's a shame that Tim had to leave early. I'd like to thank the WEPA tech team who've done such a wonderful job tonight. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all those people who've come here tonight to find out and to listen to what the candidates have to say about environmental issues. I wish everybody the best. We will be, as we said, be asking the candidates who are prepared to answer follow-up questions to give us an email that we will post on the WEPA website tomorrow, where those questions can be sent to. And I think that's about it.